Hey, I'm Melanie.
And I'm Kristen.
We're filmmakers, friends, and collaborators from Vancouver, Canada.
And after 10 years in development,
we're finally getting to make our feature film
called Switchback.
And we want to take you along with us
through all the ups and downs,
lessons we learn,
and mistakes we make
on the journey to making this film.
Welcome back to A Journey to Switchback. My name is Kristen and my pronouns are she, her.
My name is Melanie and my pronouns are they, them. And in today's video, we want to kind of talk about some of the philosophical ideas we have about what it means to shoot in wild places or shoot in the backcountry, and explore a film like this that has genre elements and why genre and wilderness kind of go together.
Switchback, our film, is set on the West Coast Trail, which is a real trail here in BC in the Pacific Northwest that combines forest elements and beach elements. But we're not specific to filming on the West Coast Trail. For us, it's really more the elements of the wilderness and that environment scenery that exists here on the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, I think we both grew up here, and so we have like a pretty deep connection to specifically this kind of, backcountry or this kind of forest, which is a rainforest, a coastal rainforest. It has very particular flora and fauna, and kind of the way that the forest looks is very particular, and that is definitely what we want to capture in the film is the ferns and the moss and the kind of undergrowth that is very a big part of this specific kind of landscape. And the West Coast Trail is sort of iconic for that, right? Because it is a coastal trail and you move in and out of forest and beach. So you're getting that like coastal tidal experience and then also that forested wilderness experience at the same time.
Mel, what was the inspiration for putting a film in that type of environment? What was the motivation?
Yeah, so if I trace this all back to the very beginning, which is quite a long time ago, I've been developing this piece for over 10 years now. It was on a trip, interestingly enough, to the Grand Canyon. So I went to the Grand Canyon with my mom, and she has a little bit less mobility than I do, so I did some solo hiking in that area. And the Grand Canyon is really unique because you don't hike up, you hike down. So you camp on the plateau and then you hike down into the canyon, and then the end of your hike is the coming back up. And I really wanted to explore that landscape, and so I did a lot of hiking by myself, which was really my first experience solo hiking. I mean, not overnight or backcountry, but solo hiking. And I did a sunrise hike. So that's where you start in the dark, and then you are trying to get to a particular location by the time the sun is rising. And I remember sitting there and watching the sun come up and just having this very kind of profound personal experience of my breath was a little heavier because I'd been working to get to that spot in time. And I thought, this is such an interesting way to talk about introspective experiences, like when you are coming to terms with changes in your life or changes to your identity, like spending time in an outdoor place and seeing yourself situated within a large landscape. It can be really, I think, just a meaningful experience. I'm sure that many hikers have this experience. I don't think it's unique to me whatsoever, but that was sort of this little inception of an idea of what would happen if you went out into that kind of environment, a wilderness environment, and you were grappling with these personal issues or relationship issues, and then you had to sort of navigate the obstacles of the landscape, and they were kind of like metaphors for what was happening in your life, in the inside your head, because we can't film thoughts, right? So it's kind of nice to be able to, I like to think of it as transposing the internal struggle and conflict to a physical obstacle where you're tripping and falling and you've lost something and your bag isn't working and the weather's changing on you, and that can create that external sort of metaphor or symbol for that experience. So yeah, that was kind of the inception. And then of course I didn't want to set it at the Grand Canyon. I wanted to set it in my kind of home environment, because I feel so connected to, I grew up at Cultus Lake. All I did in the summers was like build forts and hang out in the woods. And then, this is all pre-cell phones and all of that. So it would be like, see you at dinner, and we would just run around as kids exploring the environment. And I think it had a big impact on me. I'm sure a lot of people who've grown up in BC have had that as well. I would assume you as well.
I spent almost all my summer in a tidal pool in the White Rock Beach. So yes, I'm very, very familiar with and camping. Like that was what my family did for every summer vacation, being out in the woods and exploring. And I totally relate to that sensation of being able to get really internal when all of a sudden you're external and things are quiet and the atmosphere is different. Yeah. And one of the things I think about putting a genre film into the outdoors is that the environment is so unpredictable. Yeah. So the audience is never really sure what is going to happen in the natural environment, and it can really raise the tension too when a character is put somewhere where they don't have all the resources that they would normally have in their regular life.
Yeah, I mean that is just the nature of backcountry experience. You have what you can carry, essentially, and so your whole life gets really pared down to these essentials. And then you start to use those resources up. You start to eat your food and drink your water and, wear your clothes, and they start to get dirty, and so you have to sort of navigate that restriction of your resources. And then in our film, our character does start to lose objects as the film progresses. So we very intentionally have this character getting stripped down over the course of the story and more sort of inwardly focused. But we do the inward focus by having external markers for the internal experience. Yeah.
So what is one of the elements that you're most excited to capture on film that is specific to the environment we've set the film in?
Yeah, I mean, we like Kristen said, we've set it in the script. We've set it on the West Coast Trail because it's just an iconic landscape. But I think what we're mostly wanting to capture is just that coastal kind of experience. So transitioning between a tidal understanding of a space. So having to know when the tides are coming in and out and navigate based on this relationship with this pretty massive force of nature, which is beaches getting erased for part of the day, that then you can't traverse on that area, and so you have to go up into the woods. And so I think just capturing that unpredictability that you talked about by showing a variety of different kinds of spaces. So making sure that we have dense muddy forest and then wide expansive beaches, and really seeing both of those on the character's journey. And I think the beautiful thing about living in BC, about the West Coast Trail, is that it is still very remote, even though it is a popular trail in a popular area. You can still hike on that trail and have no service. And I think that's for me, it's part of my ethos about what it means to be in a truly wild place, or a truly disconnected from modern tech and modern life place. Because yes, you have what you carried with you, but if you can still use your phone, you kind of still have the whole world in your pocket. You can still, watch videos and text people, and so you're not really just with yourself. And I mean, that's a complicated idea. I have a lot of thoughts about this idea because without getting too too overly into it, there's a lot of writing and philosophy around what do we mean when we say a wild place? What does that actually mean? And something that I have read that I thought really resonated with our particular story is the idea that when you seek out wilderness, you find what you're looking for. So the wilderness is like a mirror. It is going to reflect back to you the things that you kind of expect to find there, or that your idea of wildness will be coloring your experience of the wilderness. And we are, really conscious of reflections and mirroring in the story that we're telling in the wilderness. So I think that's just like an interesting piece of that. And then, the other part of it is just like, what does it mean as especially like colonizers going into wild places? Because that word is often, I think, a little loaded for folks who have like existed here for a long time and cultivated the land. And then we are coming in and being like, it's so wild. And it's like, well, that's a kind of colonizer point of view. These are just things I think about. It's not necessarily part of our script, but these are just things I think about when I think about shooting in a wild place or in the wilderness or in the backcountry. Those words are sort of interchangeable for me. And thinking about how we can be of good mind when we are working in these spaces, but also how we can like leverage our personal connection with these spaces, because I do really think that we all have a personal connection. I know that you hiked and camped and did a lot of work in the backcountry. Like, when was, that sort of experience like was there a shift for you from like thinking about it as just like a place to go and recreate and to like a deeper kind of understanding of nature, of the outdoors, and like how you related to it?
I think there was a phase, like I spent a lot of time in the woods as a child, and then when I became a teenager, I really pushed against it. Like, my parents still kind of made me do all these family trips and kind of retreats, like, and camps and going away to camp, and I hated hiking. I hated sleeping in a tent back then. I like really resisted it, and I think that's just like a phase of pushing against a lot of stuff that your parents want you to do when you're a teenager. But there was a shift, and it was sometime in my mid-20s when all of a sudden I found great joy in all those things again, and freaking love sleeping in my tent and my sleeping bag. It's like my favorite. So yeah, I don't know. I guess it's interesting, and I don't know really what that's related to. If it's just phase of life, if it has something to do with being, a woman and like all the changes you're going through and having to deal with at that age as well, which are tricky to navigate until you get the hang of it.
I feel like that's so interesting to me, because there is that, when you're a teenager, that moment where you're like really trying to self-actualize, like you're trying to figure out who you are outside of who your parents think you are, or who you are at school or whatever, and you're like, wait, like I'm a person, like I've got my own, I don't agree with that, and you're kind of figuring that all out. And so it often shows up as rebellion, right? We know this, but it's interesting to me that, you had this rebellious part, and then you were able to find it on your own again later, and that it was actually part of it was to discover your own reason for wanting to go into the wilderness rather than your family's reason for going into the wilderness.
Well, I'm really excited to shoot a film in the wilderness. I think it will present some interesting challenges, which I bet we'll get into a little along the way of the logistics of filming in the wild.
Yes, you may have been hearing some sounds of nature as we've been filming this, and that's something we're aware of. The nature of filming in the outdoors is unpredictability. So we're excited to capture it, but also like sort of collaborate a little bit with it in the spaces that we plan to film in.
Thanks for joining us and listening today. We look forward to presenting even more videos for you guys down the road, and don't forget to subscribe.
Thank you. See you next time.